not every published writer has published a book, and not everyone who publishes a book is a writer. Are you confused yet?
Well, here to enlighten us about all this is Michele Tuck-Ponder. She'll share about the growing trend of anthologies. She is an attorney and co-editor of several anthologies, including The Wisdom of the Word, Great African American Sermons. Michele, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
So we need to know right off the bat, how do you define an anthology and why is it such a popular form of publishing?
Well, an anthology is usually a collection of literary writings that have something in common. So they can either be great sermons or stories about revenge or whatever the editor or the person who conceptualizes the book decides they want the topic to be.
So as long as they have something in common, the individual pieces. I see.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, why would someone contribute to an anthology instead of writing their own book?
There's a lot of reasons. A lot of times you might be experimenting with an idea, or, for example, you may not be ready to publish a full book. It's a lot easier to write a short excerpt or a short story or a piece that's a couple of hundred words as opposed to a full-length book. And then
Sure.
you're published.
So it's sort of establishing credentials.
Yes.
Okay.
So if you have ideas for an anthology, how do you know if it's a good idea, if it's going to, flesh out to be a good anthology?
I think the most important step is doing your research. First of all, if you have a great idea, chances are somebody else has had that great idea.
I've heard that before.
Absolutely. So you'll do some research. You'll figure out, well, who's written books on this topic before and how have they addressed the topic? And so you can decide to, or put something together that is uniquely yours.
So doing research first before you
Yes.
start your own project.
And it sounds like having your own voice on something that we've seen before is kind of an important part to make your anthology a good one.
And a good anthology will also narrow the topic down so that there is a theme amongst the stories, and also to look at the stories and decide, well, what do we want to include in the book and what may have been addressed before or doesn't quite fit in with the theme. So it helps you to refine your thinking to know what's been done in the past.
I see.
Got it. How do you start to seek these submissions to put into your anthology? Where does a writer begin?
I think it depends on what the topic is. And again, it's doing research. One of the things I think is a great idea is quite possibly finding a writer with a higher profile who may have some short pieces that have never been published and inviting that person to participate in the anthology. And that's a good way to lure other writers or to promote to other writers that you're putting this anthology together.
So if other writers are going to be giving you some submissions, do you have to worry about guidelines in any way to make sure that they all follow the same format?
You absolutely should. I think that before people make contributions to the book, you need to be really clear what rights, what are you buying? Or are you going to compensate people? Are you going to be able to edit? And what kind of substantive changes would you be able to make to the manuscript? So you need to sort of hammer out all those details in advance so that writers know if I submit my piece, either it's not going to be edited or it will be, there's a chance it could be shorter or longer
I
or
would
whatever
assume
the
there's
case
going to be
may
an awful lot of work behind the scenes that you have to deal with, so if other people are following your guidelines, it would be an awful lot easier for you to get your job done.
It is, and then you can be assured of the consistency in the book and
Yes,
consistency
absolutely.
in terms of the treatment of the different authors.
So they sign a contract between you and the writers that are contributing so there's no issues down the line.
Well, true. You need to figure out how these folks are going to be compensated because let's say, even though anthologies are generally not bestsellers, you never know. Right. And people may come back and say, well, I want to be compensated. So if you lay out the guidelines
Ahead of time,
really
sure,
clearly up front, then everybody knows what the expectations are.
So as an editor of an anthology, do you actually do a lot of editing of their work, or do you kind of just take what they give you and accept it or reject it?
I think you probably should be prepared to do a lot of editing.
Oh, okay.
One, because you're going to want pieces that are approximately the same length. And so you'll get some that are longer and some that are shorter.
Sure.
You might have to talk to an author about maybe this is two pieces as opposed to one, or can you cut this in half or cut it down by 25%?
You find that they're willing to make changes like that?
Well, especially newer writers who are looking to be published, absolutely.
Okay.
And is there a specific order that you put in the stories into the book, or is it what's the thought that goes into the order?
Ideally, you put yourself into the position of the reader and say, what would I like to read? How would I categorize these stories? What's the logical progression? And then you try to group the stories in that way. And then you'll find out where you have holes, because you may have conceptualized that you would deal with 5 different topics and have 3 different stories under each topic. And then once you lay the whole plan out, you'll find, okay, I'm missing a story here or there. But
So it sounds like you absolutely need to go back and change what your original design was once you see the pieces that have been submitted.
you can, or you can solicit pieces that will fill those holes in the manuscript.
Okay. Does that take a lot of work?
It does. But one of the things, again, if you've done your research, you know what authors are out there writing on the topic that you're interested in. So you can also solicit writers to write a piece for your book.
And then are you very clear, very specific with what are you what you are looking for from your writers, so that you get exactly what you need for the book, for the anthology?
Well, you can be real clear on what it is you're looking for.
Okay.
And then sometimes people have work that's already been done, they'll send in. Sometimes they will draft something originally for your anthology. And so sometimes you can get exactly what you want, but sometimes you'll get a piece and say, this has to be in the book, and that will cause you to rethink maybe some other things.
That's some really
that you
great
put in.
information.
We wish we had a
Yes.
little bit more
Yeah,
time.
it's short,
Unfortunately, we don't.
Thank you so much for coming in and for sharing what your knowledge is about this.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
Thank
Nice
you so
meeting
much,
both.
Michele.
You're welcome.